Our scripture reading this morning is from Isaiah 9, 1 through 4. And there will be no more gloom for her who is in anguish. In earlier times, he treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali with contempt. But later on, he shall make it glorious by the way of the sea, on the other side of Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who walk in darkness will see light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. You shall multiply the nation, you shall increase their gladness. They will be glad in your presence, as with the gladness of harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For you shall break the yoke of their burden and the staff on their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, as at the battle of Midian.
Now let us pause for a profound and poignant theological exposition presented by Mark Lowry.
Hi! Are y'all having a good time at the Dove Awards tonight? Are you ready for some good news? Dogs go to heaven. It's in the Bible, Psalm 36:6. Read it when you get home. Dogs go to heaven. Any dog lovers here? Yeah, I mean, it's in the, we should have known he's coming back on a white horse. There are animals there. The lion will lay down with the lamb. There are animals there. Now, cats go to hell, but I can't help that. I can't help it. I didn't write the Bible. No, I think all animals go to heaven. I really do. Read the scripture, Psalm 36:6. I think every chicken you ever ate's going to be waiting on you. And I think cats and dogs will all be there. You know, you can't go through eternity without Fluffy. And I just think they're different denominations. I think dogs are Pentecostal. You know, their tongue's always out, they're wagging, they're happy to be there, shaking their tail. It's a fun group of people, and they're happy to see you. I was raised Baptist, we weren't happy about much. I was raised independent, fundamental, Bible-believing, Bible-banging, foot-stomping, soul-winning, door-knocking, pew-jumping, devil-chasing, sin-hating, King James Version only Baptist. And I'm happy about it. Our preachers weren't always right, but they were never in doubt. And all of them were fat. We're not allowed to, I mean, you never heard one of our preachers preach on gluttony. No, sir. We want to give the Lord a challenge in the rapture. But I'm telling you, your dog will be there. I mean, when you step on your dog's foot, what does it do? It yelps, and you breaks your heart. And you get down there and say, Fluffy, I'm so sorry. And what is she doing? She's licking your foot. That's a Christian. Try that with your wife. I can prove to you. I prove to you. Who's got a wife and a dog? Anybody here got a wife and a dog? I'm telling you, Jason, your wife loves you. Your dog loves you more than your wife. Your dog loves you more than your wife. I can prove it. Take your wife and your dog home tonight, put them in the trunk of your car. Come back in 1 hour, open that trunk and see who's glad to see you. It won't be the little woman. It'll be the Christian.
Well, some of his theology might be up for a bit of debate, but Mark Lowry's always good for a bit of practical Bible study. By the way, for those of you who are wondering, Psalm 36:6 says, Your righteousness is like the strongest mountains. Your justice is like the deepest sea. Lord, you save both humans and animals. So, maybe Mark's right. Maybe dogs and cats do go to heaven. That's the sort of thing that makes us smile, makes us laugh. I love to be around people who make me laugh. I love to make people laugh. I never met my Grandpa Bishop, but I hear he was that kind of person. He passed away a couple of years before I was born. but I've certainly heard lots and lots of stories about the kind of fun-loving, happy person that George Bishop was. When he was a kid, one time he held a week-long revival in a little African-American church right down the street from where he lived. Now, he wasn't a preacher, but he just happened to wander into this church one Sunday morning and went to the service there and really enjoyed it. And so after the service, he went up to the pastor and he said, "By the way, I'm a preacher." The pastor, without asking any questions and trusting him completely, said, "Well, then why don't you come hold us a few nights of revival?" So my young teenage grandpa did just that. He went to the service starting on Sunday night and held about a week's worth of revival services, and every night the crowd got a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. He was feeling really good about himself. Now remember, he wasn't a preacher. Now let's remember too that in a lot of the tradition that I grew up in, you didn't have to have much to be a preacher. You didn't have to have any credentials or ordination or any sort of education or anything like that. You could just claim to be a preacher, and a lot of people just trusted that you were a preacher, sort of like Marsha's doing right now. The revival services were going really, really well. The little church, just later on in the week, they said the place was just absolutely packed with people who were hearing stories about this young, dynamic preacher who was coming in and preaching in the black church down the street. And as a matter of fact, apparently his mother got wind of it. And without even knowing it was him, she decided to go to that church one night for the revival service. The place was filling up. And there was my grandpa, George Bishop, standing on the platform just like this when he saw his mama walk in. He started looking around, wondering where they'd like to put a back door. And he escaped, and revival ended that night. But that was the kind of person he was. He lived free, and he loved to make people laugh. There's another story about one time. Some of you will remember that it used to be pretty common that older men would hang around the courthouse. They'd come in from out in the county or around the city, and they'd come and they'd sit around the courthouse and they'd tell tall tales and they would whittle sticks. And it used to be a pretty common thing around a lot of courthouses around the country. And one afternoon, my grandpa and some of his friends were sitting around the courthouse in Richmond, and Governor King Johnson happened to walk up. He looked down at my grandpa and asked him about his pocket knife, and he said, "Is that a sharp knife?" Without speaking a word, my grandpa just took his knife, reached up, pulled the governor's tie, and right below the knot, he cut it off. Governor said, "I reckon it is." Sat down and had a big laugh about it. I'd like to encourage you not to get that close to a governor's throat with a knife, especially these days. Everybody called my grandpa, his name was George, but everybody called him Happy. Some people never even knew his real name. They only knew him. They had always known him as Happy. And as far as they knew, that was his real name. That's all they knew him by. It was even on his gravestone, as a matter of fact. Seriously, take a look. That's how I'd like to be remembered. I'd like to be known a little bit like that, as someone who is so happy, someone who's always ready to encourage a smile and make a reason to laugh. Have you ever noticed how contagious it can be?
made your day.
Yeah, you did.
I wish you could have seen your faces. I don't know what you were thinking of before the video started to roll, but it seemed like it backed up a little bit. I saw smiles. Some of them were really, really big, toothy ones. I love those. I saw grins. I heard some of you laugh. We really could use a little more laughter nowadays. It feels good to laugh. It makes us feel good when we see and hear other people laugh. It's good for our minds, and it's good for our bodies. And psychologically and physiologically, studies have shown, research has said, that we change physiologically when we laugh. We stretch muscles all throughout our body and our face. Our pulse and our blood pressure goes up. We breathe faster, and we send more oxygen to our tissues. People who believe in the benefits of laughter say that it can be like a mild workout. Laughing offers some of the same advantages as a workout, and it's a great way to boost your heart rate. It burns calories. Yeah. A study at Vanderbilt University showed that 10 to 15 minutes of laughter burns about 50 calories. But keep in mind, before you go tossing out your workout clothes and canceling your gym membership, that a piece of chocolate also has about 50 calories. And at the rate of about 50 calories an hour, losing 1 pound would require about 12 straight hours of really good laughing. So if you eat a lot of chocolate, you need to do a lot of laughing. But the scripture also says in Proverbs 17, and we've all heard this over and over again, that laughter really is the best medicine. And then it goes on to say that a cheerful mind works healing. But then it goes further and says that a broken spirit dries up the bones. So let's be real. We all know, and some of us know all too well, that every day doesn't give us reason to laugh. Every day is not sunny. And not everything is worthy of a smile or laughter. There were some people who were delighted with the events of this past week. They celebrated that the person they felt best represents their interests, their ideals, their values now sits in the White House. For them, it was a real reason to celebrate. The result of the presidential election made them happy. But for others, not so much. It's always that way at the end of an election. In a ball game, there are always winners and losers. Some of us took the events of this past week very personally. We took it personally because this wasn't a ball game. This is our life. It's our safety. It's our place in the world. So, the delight for those who felt disenfranchised by the events of Friday came in the form of gathering and marching and speaking up on Saturday. Millions of women and supporters of fairness and equality, not just here in the U.S., but around the world, stood up and stepped out to be seen and heard and felt. And the last numbers I saw were, I think there were over 600 rallies around the world, pushing upwards of 3 million people, the last count. And we had over 5,000, nearly 6,000 here in Lexington yesterday. And because we here at BUCC believe in justice and equality and fairness, our own pastor was a prominent voice at yesterday's rally. We're proud. We're proud. We're proud of her commitment. We're proud of her commitment for speaking up and being a voice for what we believe is right in such a time as this. During the march and the rally that preceded it, there were chants among the people and songs and speeches and, yes, laughter. There was delight that we live in a country and a place where we can gather and make protest and be heard. Where there is delight, there is laughter. And even in the midst of protest. But sometimes, in the worst of circumstances, the best thing we can possibly do is laugh.
cold. Is my nose red? Oh, it is.
It's red.
What's that? You don't know? I don't either. Let's find out. Exit! Try on you. It's working very well. Bee kisses. Hi. Mind if I sit down? Hello, McNeil. Hello. Oh, look out.
What is going on here?
Yeah, sometimes in the worst of circumstances, the best thing we can do is laugh. Bruce Valanche is a really funny guy. Some of you may remember when he was with us here in Lexington and headlined a Fairness Awards event a few years back. Besides being a stand-up comedian, he's also a writer, and one of his big gigs is he writes for a lot of the television award shows. He writes for pretty much all of them, the Oscars and the Tonys, the Grammys, and the Emmys. He says that it's kind of tricky because when you're writing for those shows, you have to consider that as the night goes along, the room starts filling with losers. Really? I mean, think about it. For every one person who wins, 4 lose. And he says, you always have to consider that, and it makes for a really hard laugh when you're the loser. Today in our scripture, we find ourselves somewhere in the middle of a long and tragic story of an ancient, divided Hebrew people that pretty much felt like losers. They were one people literally divided in 2 separate nations. Sometimes we feel like our country is one of those very divided nations. L.Z. Granderson, some of you may be familiar with him. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a regular political consultant on CNN, and he's also a sports broadcaster on ESPN. Yesterday, he mentioned on his Facebook page that he was having a conversation with a friend, and his friend said, "LZ, I think this is the most divided our nation has ever been." And LZ said, "Have you ever heard of the Civil War?" As bad as it is, it's been worse. But in today's scripture, we find the nation of Israel literally divided in half, separated by a border. And for over 200 years, brothers and sisters simply could not get along. But the word we hear today from Isaiah the prophet is cause for at least a smile, because he's prophesying about a change. The people who walked in darkness, he said, have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. And as the scripture continues beyond what Cindy read to us today, Isaiah tells of a person who will come and bring good news. He says, speaking forward, Jesus, that he will come and bring good news. Good news for the outcast. Good news for the forgotten. Good news for the marginalized. Good news for the desperate. Good news for the minority. Good news for those who find themselves surrounded by bad news. When you've been the victim on the bottom of the pile or at the back of the bus or at the back of the line, lost in the masses or forgotten by the powers that be, it's good to know that someone is coming to bring good news. And not only bring the news, but to celebrate with you in this good news. Jesus, by the way, was kind of known to be a bit of a party guy. I mean, really, think about it. We see him a lot, and he's very solemn, and he's very somber, and he's very quiet. But it wasn't unusual for him to get in trouble by the tightwads over at the church about it. The religious powers that be had issues with the crowds that he hung out with and the way he enjoyed life. Matthew 11 says that he came eating and drinking, and he did it so much that they called him a glutton. And worse, he was a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Tax collectors were no more loved then than they are now, I guess. He was accused of favoring the prostitute over the privileged. He preferred the beggar to the bestowed, and he chose the worn out over the well-to-do. His crowds looked a lot like the one that's gathered here this morning. Look, sometimes life's hard, and that makes it hard to laugh. But maybe if we could see the end of our problems, we'd feel a little more like smiling and laughing through them. Truth is, if we trust God, we trust that the one we've put our confidence in knows the beginning from the end.
Last year I went through a tornado. Have you ever been through a tornado? They sound like freight trains, don't they? Well, I'm from Texas, and I had never been through a tornado before, and I was on my houseboat. I have a houseboat, which is really just a trailer on floats. And about 2:30 in the morning, I woke up and heard a freight train coming down our lake. And I thought, there ain't no freight train on this lake. And it got closer and closer and closer and closer, and all of a sudden it hit, and it hit with a vengeance, and I didn't know what was going on, and all the lights were blowing out on the dock, and the boat was bucking and rocking, and I was thrown to the floor, and on the way to the floor, I grabbed the curtains and looked outside, and lightning was flashing, and rain was flying sideways, and I thought, isn't that pretty? My ADD kicked in for just a second there. And then I realized, I'm going to die. And I felt my way to the front of the boat, and it was still bucking and rocking, and I looked over at Pier 2. I'm on Pier 1, and I looked over at Pier 2, and the lightning flashed again, and I saw broken legs of the pier stretching into the sky, and I saw the bottoms of boats that had been flipped upside down, and I thought, oh, that can't be happening. You know, lightning flashes, and then it's gone, and you think, did I really see that? And it flashed again, and I thought, oh, I did see it. And I got on the radio, and I picked it up, and I said, are you guys there? Are you guys there? And this is Mark over on Pier 1. Are you okay on Pier 2? And after a few minutes, a few of them grabbed their radios. They said, yes, we're okay. We're upside down, but we're okay. And they'd all been through it before. Come to find out, this dock I'm on is called Tornado Alley. Of course, they didn't tell me that when I rented my space. And they'd all been through it before, and it scared the fool out of me. And I went up there the next morning to the coffee shop, and everybody drinks coffee and tells their fish tales. And I got some good fish tales. Of course, I've never fished in my life, but it don't stop you from having a good fish tale. And that morning, we had new tales to tell. And I said, you know what, y'all? I would have enjoyed that a lot more had I known I was going to live through it. Because it was fun. You know, I bet you when we get to heaven, well, I don't bet. Well, I could bet. I'm Baptist. We can bet. You Pentecostals, you bet you go straight to hell. But I bet and go right there, but no, I bet you that when we get to heaven, You look me up and see if it ain't true. We're going to look back over our lives. And we're going to say, you know what? I'd have enjoyed that a lot more had I known I was going to live through it.